If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
This is horticulturist Jessica Walliser from SavvyGardening.com and KDKA Radio in Pittsburgh. You're listening to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Show with your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Let's go to the Ivy Organics 3-in-1 Plant Garden Hotline, Holly, and bring in our next guest.
Maia Toll is an herbalist, storyteller, follaoriste, and a women's wisdom mentor. Opened her natural product shop, Herbalist.com, after returning from a year-long apprenticeship with a traditional healer in Ireland. She's a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild and teaches across the globe. She has a new book out entitled The Illustrated Herbiary Guidance and Rituals from 36 Bewitching Botanicals. Welcome to the program, Maia.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us on the program and enlighten us, not only Holly and myself, but all of our listeners.
Well, enlighten you about?
Well, I want to start out with, we understand what an author is, but you're also an herbalist. What is the definition of an herbalist, and what do you do as an herbalist?
First off, I think it's probably important to let your listeners know that there's no one definition as an herbalist. My personal definition is someone who works with herbs. So that's a really broad definition that allows people who are gardening with herbs, cooking with herbs, using herbs as medicine to think of themselves as an herbalist. You can get more specific. There's something called a clinical herbalist, which is someone who's using herbs as medicine and helping other people to regain their health in that way.
Well, okay. Herbs are becoming very popular, and as herbs come back...
It's an herbal comeback.
Herbal comeback, yeah.
But you disagree. You say herbs have always been there. Why do you say that?
Because they have. If you go back in our history, you'll find people like Pliny, Plato, Aristotle, our earliest philosophers are talking about how to use herbs as medicine. Hippocrates, who's considered the father of medicine, used herbs and said, let your food be your medicine, right? And that's where the herbs come in. So in America, we had a time period where we lost using herbs as medicine, and we're having a revival here. But if you go to China, India, Japan, Europe, they didn't have that big gap that we have here.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. The Asian continent or community, they understand how certain herbs affect the body and how they can combat certain unhealthy elements. And us here in North America have just kind of go, well, we'll just go to the doctor when we have a problem.
Exactly.
So
there's a bit of economic history there.
Absolutely, yeah. Continue, yes, go ahead.
So in the late 1800s, if you needed medical care, you had a wide array of choices. You could go to doctors who used herbs, doctors who used homeopathy, and the people that we now consider doctors were called surgeons. And what they did was they cut you open. That was what, their specialty was. As we came into the Industrial Revolution and we began to understand how to extract specific chemical constituents from plants and also how to make synthetic chemical constituents, our robber barons, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, saw a big opportunity. And Rockefeller in particular stepped in, helped the American Medical Association come into being. And then he did something really sneaky, tricky, which changed the course of our history here. He hired a public relations guy named Flexner, and Flexner claimed to be a medical doctor. And he went to all the different universities that were teaching medicine, and they were teaching herbs and homeopathy and surgery and all the different aspects. And he had them do evaluations, and he then did write-ups, which he took to Congress, and he claimed that the herbalism and the homeopathy were snake medicine and didn't work. And if you actually look at the records from the time, there were some pretty big flus going around, And the records actually show that the homeopaths were the ones who were treating it really successfully, not the people who are now our doctors. Those were the surgeons, right? But because Carnegie and Rockefeller saw this opportunity to produce medicine, patented medicine, you can't patent a plant, they kind of steered our Congress in that direction. And they used this Flexner report, which was written by this fake doctor, Flexner, as the basis for that conversion.
It's definitely interesting. Now, I like to make my own homegrown herbal tea. We've used lemon balm, lemongrass, our own dehydrated pears from our pear tree. What is the correct way to make herbal tea, and why do you feel that's better than normal tea?
So, normal tea, like what we normally call tea, is usually black tea. And black tea is from a plant, so it is technically herbal. And it's an antioxidant, so there's nothing wrong with black tea. But if you want to get the chemical constituents from a plant so that it has healing power, then you need a much longer steep. You need a minimum of 20 minutes. For instance, if you're making lemon balm tea, you pour your hot water over, you let it infuse for at least 20 minutes. If you want to get a really strong infusion, you pour your hot water over, you let it sit for 20 minutes, and then you pop it in the fridge for a couple of hours, even overnight. Because then what you're doing is you're getting both a hot infusion and a cold infusion, and different chemical constituents within the plant are going to be extracted by the hot heat and different ones by the cold.
Very interesting. People just, and we've seen it, and I'm sure you have, 5 minutes, good enough, let's drink the tea, but you lose so much of what your intentions are to get out of that herbal tea.
But typically with like black tea or green tea or even like the white tea, they say you don't want to oversteep it because it can make it bitter. But this is different because it's the herbal tea. It's the herbs as opposed to something like a leaf tea like black, green, or white tea. Is that correct?
Well, that's a little murky. So most of your herbal teas are leaf teas, right? They're from the leaves of the herbs. When you're drinking a black tea, a green tea, or a white tea, usually you're drinking it for taste, not for its medicinal properties. Okay. So, what you're doing is you're saying, I don't want it bitter because I want it to taste good. There's a chemical called a tannin, and that comes out the longer you steep it, and that's part of what makes it dry and bitter. But with the herbal teas, you're saying, I want the medicine from this, even if it doesn't taste as great as I would like. So it might get bitter.
that makes sense.
Sometimes in life, the worst tasting stuff is the best for us.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about some of the benefits of plants that you can grow in your garden. You talk about some of these in the book without giving too much information away. So let's talk about rosemary, roses, and dandelions, which people kind of have their own perspective on. But what are some of the benefits for the rosemary, roses, and dandelions?
Yeah, so I do want to just set up the book a little bit.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the book deals with more of what we call the energetic properties of the plant. So if you remember the Victorians, they used to exchange posies of plants, and each plant had its own meaning. So each plant still has its own meaning and its own vibe. And that's what the book's about. There are so many wonderful medicinal herbals out there, I didn't feel the need to write another one. So I can talk a little bit about medicinal properties of the three plants you mentioned, but don't expect to find that in the book. What you'll find is the purely energetic properties. So when I talk a little bit about the personalities, that's what's in the book.
And we've read the book, and it's a really interesting aspect of covering 36 different categories when it comes to, like you said, you weren't going to write another book about herbs and how to use them, but more about the, story behind them, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Yes. Yeah. So with the plants you mentioned, rosemary has traditionally been used for memory, both in terms of drinking rosemary tea. There's actually been studies with the essential oil from rosemary. You get some of that in the tea, but you also get it if you buy a bottle of essential oil and put a drop on your hands, rub it together, and smell it. Rosemary increases blood to the brain, and it's very helpful for short-term memory. So if you're taking a test, you can use a little rosemary to help you through it. In terms of its personality, it's been used traditionally to say, remember me. So if you put a sprig of that in your bouquet, you'd be saying, remember me, don't forget me. So if you put rosemary with rose, your message would be, I love you and don't forget me. Because rose is an herb for the heart. It's actually what I give to people when they're in grief. I'll give them like a rose petal elixir, which is a very sweet rose syrup that they can put a few drops in their black tea if they want, or their seltzer, or just on their tongue. But also, I sometimes will give people a rose bush to put in their garden, which is a lovely way to commemorate a lost love. And then we have dandelion, which you mentioned, which I feel like that's everyone's garden Darth Vader, right? Nobody wants the dandelion invasion. But dandelions are incredible internal medicine. The leaves are very supportive for our kidneys, and the roots are very supportive for our liver. And the plant, you can probably figure this out if you're a gardener. The energetic medicine is tenacity. That plant is not going away. It comes up through cracks in the sidewalk. Dandelion somehow manages to survive no matter what we do, and it does it cheerfully. So good medicine for all of us.
That's fantastic. Now, where can our listeners find out more about you and get your book?
So my website is Maia Toll, which is MAIATOLL.com, and the book is available from most book resellers. So you can go to your local shop, or if you want to hop online, all of the major resellers are carrying the book.
Well, it's a very unique, different type of book that our listeners are probably not familiar with that's out there, but it has a lot of information that is very entertaining and educational about 36 different plants that you've covered in the book.
Yes, and the illustrations are fabulous.
Absolutely. Maya, we greatly appreciate you taking time and joining us on the program and educating Holly, myself, and all of our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
You too.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.